Good morning everyone, and welcome to this morning's meeting of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee on the 21st of August. Can I just start by introducing the top table? On my far left, your right hand side, we have Councillor Liz Barrett, Vice Convener for the committee. Next to Liz, we have Fraser Croft, Strategic Lead for Environment and Infrastructure. And on my right hand side, we have Adam Taylor from Democratic Services. Can I start off just by asking Adam to confirm any apologies and to do a roll call for members in attendance this morning? Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. We've had no formal apologies this morning. We have one member online, so I'll just ask him to confirm that he's actually in the meeting. Councillor Kigali?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. All other members are present in the chambers, Convener.
Thank you, Adam. Can I just remind elected members if you want to ask a question or at the appropriate time give a comment, can I just ask you to use the chat box or just get my attention if you're in the room, please. Can I remind councillors as well that we're in a pre-election period and normal rules apply. Can I ask if there's any declaration of interest on any of the items on the agenda this morning? That's great, thank you. Can we agree the minute from our last meeting held on the 1st of May 2024? Thank you. Outstanding business statement. Can I ask if there are any questions on the outstanding business statement? And just to ask if we can remove the items that are now being completed. Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett is going to be taking item 5 on the paper, so I will now pass over to Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Could I ask Davindi Grant, the Team Leader for Climate Change and Sustainable Development, to introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vice Convener. So this report provides an update on the allocation of the 353k of nature restoration funding received by Perth and Kinross Council from Nature Scott last year for the use in 23-24 and outlines the proposed approach for utilising the 175k of funds for 24-25. The purpose of this funding from Nature Scott is to address the biodiversity crisis and its causes, habitat loss and fragmentation, and invasive species, while recognising the need to address both climate change and biodiversity crises at the same time. Appendix 1 provides as overview of the 15 projects successfully delivered last year, and these ranged from both council projects, so equipment for green space to support the biodiversity enhancements of Grow Wild, delivery of invasive species control on over 25 kilometres of the River Almond, and community suds ponds enhancements that were really great at bringing communities together and had over 65 community volunteers. Similarly to previous years, due to the timing of the confirmation of the funding, we're recommending delegating approval again to the Strategic Lead for Environment and Infrastructure to approve projects recommended by the Nature Restoration Fund Working Group in line with the scoring criteria developed last year. This looks at maximising biodiversity and wider benefit across Perth and Kinross, and consideration of project types and geographic distribution will be ensured. Thank you.
Thank you, Davindi. Do members have any questions on the report? I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, sorry. Apologies, Councillor Forbes, I didn't see that in the chat. What's your question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. We obviously get the money for this from Nature Scott. Does the Nature Scott also give us money for the council resources to be used to administer the fund?
No, they do not. It's just for the actual projects themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Davindi, are there any other questions? Councillor Ling?
Thanks, Vice Convener. Davindi, obviously, I think this is a really good paper and a really good, a lot of good projects there. Do we follow up, you know, on an ongoing basis how they've developed? Because obviously they've been given the funding this year and they've started off the project. It would be good to maybe see where it is in maybe 3 years' time and how it has changed areas of wetland or anything else that's set out for. So I was just wondering if we do a follow-up, so it can give a basis for continuing. Obviously, if we've been gifted the money or given the money, we want to spend it as best we can, but it would show which projects are the most successful and sustainable. Thanks.
Yes, so with the projects, we confirm that the project has been successfully completed at the end of sort of the year, or some of them roll over into next year. And we'll receive photographs, and occasionally there'll be site visits to the project. Several of the projects that we had in year 1 or year 2 have turned into multi-year projects. It's been very exciting to see groups that have started with a small project and they've done it successfully, and then it's sort of empowered them to apply again and for a slightly bigger project or a different project and expand. So we have done some of that on an ad hoc basis, but I think it is a very good suggestion, and we'll can see what we can do about longer term follow-up.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ling. Thanks, Davindi. And a second question from Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. Paragraph 5.2 says the committee is asked to approve in retrospect. Davindi, can you just expand on what that actually means, the in retrospect bit?
The in retrospect bit meant that the call for applications opened in July. So the call for community groups is already open. I believe this happened in consultation with the convener and vice convener ahead of approval here.
Thanks, Davindi. So really the only thing we're approving in retrospect is the fact that the fund's already open for applications. Is that true?
Yes.
Great, thank you. That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. And question from Councillor Grant Stewart.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'd like to ask about the underspend of £6,000 in paragraph 4.2. Can you inform us why there's an underspend and what happens with that £6,000? Thank you.
Yes, so there's an underspend because when community groups and council teams bid for the money, quite often it's before they have detailed quotes from contractors, or when we get actual costs in, or they may decide when they're implementing a bit of a project, there's a little bit that's not viable. So the amounts claimed have been slightly less than were initially allocated. And what we've done in previous years is reallocate the funding as part of the sort of next year's fund. So we'll be looking to do that again.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jack Welch, and then your third question, Angus.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for the report, Davindi. This funding it goes a significant way to really starting to empower and encourage communities to bring forward biodiversity and flooding mitigation type measures. My specific question is, it's quite a short window of application it would appear in the report, to bring forward a project. I guess two questions around that. Do you give yourself sort of flexibility out with that application window to fund projects that maybe are taking a bit longer to develop and come forward? And ultimately as well, in terms of identifying potential projects, are you reliant on, if you like, communities coming to you, or is there an element of trying to encourage communities to bring forward projects? So thank you.
So I suppose to answer the second bit first, we have been proactive at trying to reach communities, especially the Tayside Biodiversity Partnership is doing a huge amount with various community groups, and whenever they come across community groups or potential projects, or they're working with landowners, they are trying to push them towards applying and alerting them that this funding will be coming live, so community groups have time to prepare and respond. So it's not just they see that the fund's opening and have to come up, create a project within a month. Similarly, the Climate Change Land and Restoration Officer, with their work with landowners and different sort of wider community groups, is similarly trying to push the fund, as are other council staff going about their sort of day-to-day jobs. In terms of looking at projects out with the window, it's something we'd have to consider if we have overspend or underspend. Ideally, we're looking to allocate the funding and we don't hold a reserve back for unallocated funding. So we don't keep £40,000 back, but if we did have underspend and there was a good project, we could consider it if this running it by the conveners or the committee, just to confirm that people were happy with the fund being spent in this way.
Okay, that's helpful. It's just all about, trying to maintain, I guess, momentum and this pipeline of projects, which, budget funding for a relatively short period is sometimes quite challenging to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Davindi and Jack. Councillor Parrott, your question.
Thank you very much. I notice at paragraph 4.1 that it refers to the Nature Restoration Fund as a 5-year initiative. Is there any indication at this stage, because we are at least halfway through the 5 years, I think, as to whether this initiative will be extended into future years? It's certainly something, if there's resource for it to be extended, I would encourage us to seek to have extended, given the importance of tackling the biodiversity emergency we have. I'm just interested to know if there's any indication of the extension of this initiative. Thanks.
Not that I have heard either way, but we'll keep you updated.
Thank you, Davindi. I think we're now on Councillor Forbes' third question.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Third and last, I'm sure you'll be pleased to know. Davindi, there's lots of really good examples referenced to in the appendix. One in my ward in Errol just been one that jumps out at me, obviously. I think something we do as a council, and I've mentioned this in many committee meetings before, is we always sell the things that go really well, understandably so. Did any of the projects not go quite so well? Have there been any disasters along the way?
There haven't been any disasters along the way. I'm very pleased to hear. There have been a few delays over the sort of the 3 years, projects that haven't been delivered, and there have been a few sort of small incidents on specific projects, but there haven't been any projects that haven't been able to deliver. There is one project that's mentioned in the report, a school project where we've had to defer the funding from last year to this year. But other than that, all of the projects were able to be delivered.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions, so I will move the report. The Nature Restoration Fund over the last 3 years has delivered significant biodiversity enhancement across Perth and Kinross. It's been a great opportunity for council operations, as well as supporting and empowering community organisations across Perth and Kinross to deliver change in line with the Nature Restoration Fund priorities. I'd like to give thanks to all those involved in the successful delivery of the 15 projects that we've seen in the report from this past year, and I'm excited to see what important projects are going to be delivered next year. I'm happy to accept the recommendations within the report, and I move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Richard Waters to second?
Yeah, happy to second this. I think the Nature Restoration Fund does a great job, and it supports a lot of very, very worthwhile projects from nature and biodiversity perspective within the area. So more than happy to second this.
Thank you, convener. And members have comments on the report. I see Councillor Cuthbert, Councillor Forbes, Councillor Parrott and Councillor Illingworth. So Councillor Cuthbert first.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yes, I think this is a fantastic report. I think the work that's being done is really encouraging, and I'm really pleased to see all the communities getting involved and doing their own things. So anything we can do to support them and to encourage them, I would support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. I agree, actually. I think there's lots of really interesting stuff in there, from your pretty low level things to quite major projects, and I'm delighted that we're able to support them. It does worry me slightly, I have to say, that once again we're being given work to do on behalf of Nature Scot and not actually given the funding to manage the process of making it happen and the process of getting that money out to people. But nonetheless, it's a very good initiative, and it seems our officers are all over this and doing a fantastic job, so thanks to them.
Thank you. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Raj. Yes, I just want to make the comment that over the recess I was reading a book on the loss and decline in invertebrate and insect species and the massive impact it's having on the rest of the food chain and on human life in terms of pollination. And I'm therefore, if I wasn't before, and I think I was, I am ever more supportive of anything and everything that we can do to encourage biodiversity through these projects and others, because the decline in invertebrates in the last 25 years or more globally is actually horrific. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. And Councillor Illingworth.
Yeah, it's actually not 100% true that there were no disasters in this process. When I was out in Abernethy digging out a pond, 2 people actually fell into the mud, and I think we have to thank them for their sacrifice for the project. Otherwise, it was great to see people from the community coming together and making a difference, and we dug out a big pond, and it also highlighted to me the importance in terms of planning, that suds ponds actually fill up with silt, and we actually need to have a good hard think about how we maintain suds ponds in the longer term. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth, and thank you everyone else for your positive comments. And Councillor Ling.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I think it's really interesting report. It's great to see all the things that communities are doing, and I think that's what we as a local authority, we can't do everything anymore. We can't afford to do it. And picking up Councillor Forbes' comment about, I think that's what we should be doing, supporting and taking funding where we can get it and help to give it to groups who are willing to do the work. So it's a small part of the chain that we are with moving the money towards, and I think it's really worthwhile. A lot of these projects are fantastic, and as we move forward, giving communities and people the tools to do the work that we would like to do or like to be seen to be done is the only way moving forward for all local authorities, governments and everything, to empower the people to do the work and give them the tools. It's great. I would like to see where we are in 3 years with that, because it's amazing how quickly nature can take back from manicured gardens and manicured bits of ground and etc. Nature takes it back really quickly, and if we can give it a hand to take it back in areas that we want taken back by nature, this is a great example of what we're doing. So thanks to Davindi and all the team for the work that they're doing with biodiversity and everything. The most dramatic, and it was, I'm not as well read as Councillor Parrott, you know, that book sounded far too meaty for me to read in recess on my one day off this year. But what I'm talking about is I went to the museum and saw how many moths and butterflies that were captured and put in trays in 1900. And there was like 5 drawers of them, different species. And then they did the same thing in 2000. 1 drawer, because there's so many species lost. And that was a dramatic impact that Megan, and seeing that, realised where we are heading and what we have to do. And this is part of the journey to revert that. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any further comments, so if there's no amendment, can we please agree the recommendations in the report? Thank you all. I'll pass back to the convener.
Thank you for that. And you know, comments and support, including Councillor Illingworth actually getting involved in it as well, I think are commendable. So thank you. Good. Item 6 on the paper, year-round weather event response. Can I ask Fraser Croft, Strategic Lead for Environment and Infrastructure, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Convener. I'm pleased to introduce this report on the year-round weather event response. This reflects feedback and discussion with officers and elected members over recent years that the winter maintenance approach that has historically been shared with committee does not reflect the all-year nature of the changing weather patterns and events we are now experiencing. As we all know, the effects of climate change are increasingly obvious. There are more frequent and severe weather events, including storms, flooding, and droughts, which don't stick to traditional seasonal patterns. This report shows how we are reshaping our approach to severe weather planning, moving from a winter focus to looking at how we prepare all year round. It is important to note that most of our services are already ready to respond to severe weather events throughout the year. However, through reviewing and learning from recent events and from the Severe Weather Improvement Plan, which has been discussed and updated through the Scrutiny and Performance Committee, we have identified several areas for improvement. These enhancements, detailed in the report, will ensure that our response is more robust, efficient and effective, safeguarding our communities and infrastructure. It is important to note that we don't work alone. We work closely with key partners such as SEPA, the Met Office, Police Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue Services, energy providers, and of course, neighbouring local authorities, amongst others. Their expertise and resources are invaluable in our planning and response efforts. This collaborative approach ensures a comprehensive and coordinated response to weather events, leveraging the strengths of each organisation. Equally vital is the role of our local communities. They are our first line of defence, preparing for, responding to and recovering from events in their own areas. Their proactive efforts allow public services to focus on maintaining critical infrastructure and supporting those most in need, particularly individuals who may not have local support networks. The resilience and readiness of our communities are fundamental to our overall strategy. While we are expanding our focus to year-round weather events, it is important to acknowledge our statutory responsibilities, particularly regarding the management of snow and ice on our road network. Our winter maintenance policy remains a critical component of our strategy, ensuring the safety and accessibility of our roads during the winter months. As you will see from the report, no changes are proposed to this policy this year, as it continues to meet our statutory obligations effectively. In conclusion, this report outlines our proactive approach to managing severe weather events, emphasising collaboration, community involvement and continuous improvement. I'm confident in the strategies and improvements detailed in this report will enhance our resilience and readiness. As this report covers services from across the Council, there are colleagues from various teams online and in the room today to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Fraser. I've got a couple of questions already in the chat. Can you please just populate the chat or let me know if you do want to ask a question. Councillor Kugali, Noah, first question.
Can you hear me okay? Maybe that's yes. On page 28, just a question about 5.7 and the incident management team. Just wondering what the protocol is and how you actually made the decision to set that up. Just a bit more detail, or is it just entirely ad hoc?
Fraser, you.
Thank you. I'm not sure entirely caught all the question there. Is it around about just the setting up of an IMT? Did you say, Councillor Kugali?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so there are obviously there are arrangements in place. Depending on the nature of the event, will depend on how we respond. If it's something which is impacting at a regional level or of scale, then Police Scotland would take the lead on that. If it's something perhaps more of a localised nature, then we would look to cover that internally here within Perth and Kinross Council. Again, depending on the nature of the event which happened, we would look to pull together the appropriate officers and teams and indeed partner agencies in order to prepare ourselves in terms of response and indeed recovery. But these are well established arrangements, both locally, regionally and nationally, and we've pretty much been following that for a number of years.
Thank you, Fraser. Angus?
Yeah, thanks, convener. We use the phrase managing expectations, or expectations will require to be managed at 4.9. And then if we scroll on a little bit further to 5.18, the very last line says a completely clean gully pot will not drain during heavy and persistent rain if the pipework is at capacity. Now, I know that to be the case because I've spent probably far too much time for my own good talking to council officers whilst looking into gully pots. But I think it's fair to say the general public don't know that, and you'd be amazed at the number of people who certainly live in my ward that seem to know far more about this than anyone else does. What more can we do to get that message out to people, not specifically about gully pots, but certainly including them, just what the restrictions of the system are, systems are, and really to manage people's expectations about what we can do as a council.
Fraser.
Perhaps bring in Stuart, but just to start with, we do have a report coming to Economy and Infrastructure Committee with an update on the gully system, but also the performance of that. I think there is an opportunity perhaps to use that report in order to present more publicly available information on the system, the network, what we can do, the limitations obviously that we have described, but also our role and the role of Scottish Water in that, and expanding that then to engagement with landowners, farmers, etc. But Stuart, is there anything you would wish to add?
Thanks, Fraser. I would just add that prior to Lindsay Gowans and comms moving on, we were working with Lindsay to put together a thing that could go onto the website that explains the how gullies work and the gully emptying process. So I think following the report to committee, E&I committee, we'll look to roll that out, and that'll be a more public facing thing to make people aware. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lane, you wanted to?
It was just to say I've seen the report at pre-agenda, and it certainly extended my knowledge of what happens with the water when they go into Gallipot. So Councillor Forbes and everybody will, will see it when that the report comes out in the next week or so. But I think it will be really useful for our comms team to put out, because I didn't really know how Gullipots work and when they're connected to soakaways or when they're connected to Scottish Water infrastructure to take away, and it works totally differently, and they can just be overloaded sometimes, and people think they're blocked but they're actually overloaded. So that report will be really useful for all the members that are on the committee, and I think we should put out as an elected member briefing as well, the report, so people can answer members of the public's questions. That's a really good report. Thanks.
Thank you for that addition. Helpful. Be good to see. Hugh, question?
Yeah, I was just looking at the report. There's nothing which I've been to see about the Perth flood prevention scheme, and which failed us. Well, it didn't fail us. It hasn't put in proper operation last October. Most of the members I've spoken to, why don't they shut these floodgates from October through till end of March? Except for two, the one crossing the lower bridge and also down the harbour. 2 gates could be left open and closed if there is a dire emergency, but the rest of the time, the other gates should be just shut for the whole winter.
You're running into a comment now, Hugh, but from your question point, I think the incident.
Well, I say it's a very big report.
The incident in itself has been well covered, but I think Fraser can give a little bit of update on what's in this report in relation to looking forward.
Yes, there's nothing in it but forward. Yeah.
I'm going to let Fraser come in if that's okay, Hugh. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Yes. So if we refer to paragraphs 5.32 onwards, I suppose that's where we start to consider some of those issues around about the not just the Perth flood scheme, but our resource deployment more generally. So there's a number of items in there in terms of our approach going forward. Again, what the learning has been from last October, and indeed a number of other events. We are looking to expand our resilience in terms of the staffing resource that we have available in order to be able to respond. We have looked at the trigger levels regarding the floodgate procedures. We're confident that they remain relevant. We have engaged with SEPA in terms of the protocols around the use of data, and one of the things that we are looking to bring back certainly later in the year, perhaps as part of the budget process, is consideration of the stopping up or closing off of a number of floodgates throughout the scheme. Now, clearly there are cost implications attached to that, as well as some amenity issues that we will have to consider in terms of access, etc. One of the things, my experience now, having come into the role relatively recently, and having been out on the tour of the Perth flood scheme, it's costing a lot of money to maintain. So it's now an ageing scheme as well, obviously over 20 years old. So we need to be looking at that perhaps in a cost spend to save type approach as well. There are costs around that for the future, but there's also costs involved in providing the response to closing the gates. So there's a number of things in here and within the report, as I say, within that section where we are making some changes, which we certainly hope will improve our resilience.
Thank you, Fraser, and just a thanks as well. I know quite a few councillors here went on that tour as well, and it was very beneficial to see how the system works. So thanks for officers and that for providing that kind of level of information, because it definitely helps us as elected members when you can see firsthand the extensive nature of the flood defences around Perth and the challenges around it. David, you have a first question?
I'd say in general, I think the council does a really good job with the limited resources. What improvements would you like to see made?
In short, the things that are set out in the report.
Thank you for that. Jack.
Thank you, convener. I guess ultimately for officers and for us as councillors to take forward, new proposals, changes, spend capital and commit to ongoing revenue expenditure. It's all about understanding information and data. Something that I think is critical, especially in a dynamic environment as climate is affording, is this aspect of where we need to actually intervene. And I'm conscious, and the question is around losing that knowledge within the heads of experienced staff. How are we capturing what is happening on the ground, in a format that ultimately can be referred to as evidence-based, investment and changes? How are we capturing that data of events, severity of events, location of events, landowner involvement, the farming community? All these are key information that we need to ensure that we embed within the knowledge of the of PKC. How are we doing that? Is for example GIS, which is used by other agencies such as SEPA, are we part of that? That essentially is my question. Thank you.
Fraser.
Thank you. I think that's going to be on my technical abilities, but I'll maybe look to Rick and or Stuart just in terms of Rick, maybe to start with in terms of the work of the flooding team and how we're capturing, data, working with SEPA and other agencies, but capturing the data during and after events.
Yeah, thanks, Fraser. As a past employee of SEPA and helping set up their observed flood event workstream, which looks to capture just that sort of data that you talk about, locations, times, impacts, community level, property level, those approaches, like you imply, are picked up across other agencies, other local authorities. We are currently working on a digital tool to capture data from watercourse inspections or body of water inspections, and that's in parallel with the structures team. That same tool is flexible enough to be used to capture data out on the ground in the run-up to, during and after flood events. Now, I've got a vested interest with flooding, but the purpose of the paper is all year round, all weather, so it can be used for other weather events such as snow and ice, or drought, or wildfire, or damage to infrastructure that we have an interest in generally. All of that information, if it's an asset on the ground and we can put a pin on a map, we can add it to these sort of data sets, which can then be shared. We have regular meetings with other local authorities and discuss the approaches they're taking. There's a Scots flood risk management meeting at the end of this week as an example of one of those sort of meetings where we collaborate and share the information, and that will include the likes of Scottish Water and SEPA and the other agencies that do come along, and like I said, that's flooding. In terms of using those tools to capture the inherent knowledge of the officers that will be leaving us in short order, we don't have a mechanism to plug them in, but we obviously pick as much information from them as early as possible, as quickly and efficiently as possible, so that we don't lose it, because that local knowledge is critical and we never lose it.
Thank you for your answer. That's good to know, and it is good to hear that work's underway. I think it's important that if there's additional resource investment needed going forward, it would be good to flag that, because this is an issue with diminishing resources and increasing challenges. It helps inform good decision making.
Thank you. Grant Lane.
Thanks, convener. I've still got a vision of officers being plugged in my head now, and Stephen Crawford won't like that, because obviously it will put our energy usage up. So we'd have to discuss it with him before we plug in. But My question is, I kind of take a little bit issue with Councillor Anderson in that I think there's quite a bit in here about the flooding and what happened, and by the good work done by scrutiny committee, etc., to look at and lessons learned. Because I'm sure in here in this report, I think we were talking about getting lightweight barriers for the bridge, etc., which can be put into place a lot easier and a lot more more speedily, etc. So I think there's quite a bit in here about what we as a local authority are going to do in flood situations. And the way things are going, we can't say, as was suggested, let's close the gates from October to March. Because
Do we have a question? Do we have a question?
the question is, are we, wait a minute, the question coming out of it is, are we continuing to look forward to purchasing new methods and more effective methods of dealing with flood situations, which can happen at any time of the year? Sorry, Convener.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks. Grant Stewart, you have a question?
Thank you, Convener. I was looking at the figure 1 in 5.2 about the operational activities statistics for last winter. And Mr. Croft certainly alluded to about climate change, that we've got a changing dynamics. I'm wondering, do we have figures for flood impact and staff activity?
Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. We've got data on it's an ADMS site that we've got within the Road Maintenance Partnership that's got data on the number of yellow weather warnings, amber weather warnings, red weather warnings. We also have data on when we've reacted and closed floodgates. So yeah, there is data there. If I'm being honest, we probably need to tidy up and make it a bit more readable and a bit more retrievable, but we do have data there that we can look to demonstrate the move towards reactive responses to flooding, as opposed to our traditional, if you want to call it, reactive response to winter. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep,
You okay
thank you,
with that?
Convener. Yep, I'm happy with that.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Angus, your second question?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Could I draw your attention to 5.8, and it's to do with the response from council staff out of hours. I'm just slightly confused by this. Do we have 3 levels of response? In other words, do we have the number that goes to Aberdeen Council, which anyone can phone? Do we then have someone else a bit more senior that's available via a dedicated pager number? I thought pagers were from the 80s, but I'm maybe showing my age. And then we obviously then have somebody from the ELT available. So I guess if you want a specific question from me, Convener, if someone in Invergowrie sees water coming through the front door, who do they phone, and what would happen after that phone call takes place?
Fraser.
Okay, I'll maybe bring in Hunter or Stuart, but yeah, in terms of the public making an inquiry, they would simply phone in to the council's emergency phone line. That would then direct the call, assuming it's an emergency, through our emergency response duty officer and the ERDO. And that individual would then make an assessment of the issue at hand, and from there would then look to tee up with the appropriate teams or officers within the council and or other agencies as we go forward. But does that sort of cover it, or do I need to bring in Hunter?
Angus.
Yeah, I think it does cover it. So if I understand you correctly, somebody phones the out of hours number, that triggers an ERDO. And if it looks like it's a bigger issue, then it would work its way up the chain to someone else. And ultimately, it might end up with somebody from the ELT if it's become a major disaster. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Dave, question?
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, my question relates to section 2.1 under resource implications on page 46. Basically, it's the finance. I'm always interested in the money. It says that it's going to be managed within existing resources, but presumably it's going to lead to greater efficiency and a better service. So I'm just curious, could someone give me an example of how it's going to improve service?
So I think this is about how we work together. I suppose it's that collaboration piece between the different teams. I made reference earlier to the involvement going forward, certainly, and has been the case, our parking and civil contingencies team in helping to support the council's response, but also communities. Elaine's team here in terms of our community wardens, visitor management team. We've got our operations colleagues as well, sort of during working hours. So I think in that respect, it's a better coordination of our resources, which would allow us to then provide that improved response and better resilience within the resources that we have, including working with our partner agencies. You know, again, some of the learning that we've had over the recent months. So for me, it's about that more efficient and effective use of the resources that we already have.
Okay. Great, thank you. Angus, your third question.
Got a couple more after this, I'm afraid, convener. 5.21 tells us 910 kilometres of the council's 2,500 network is designated as high priority. Was that reduced in the last budget round from something else down to 910k?
I think the answer is no, but I'll defer to Stuart.
No, it wasn't reduced. It's sat at 910 for a number of years. There was a potential saving offered up to that, but it wasn't taken as part of the budget process. It's stayed the same.
Thank you. Angus, your fourth question.
You're too fast for me, convener. 5.34, I'm just interested in the Lower Friarton Harbour area, because I know that was a flashpoint at one of the recent floods, and I'm interested in the text messaging system being set up. I wonder if we could get a little bit more information on how that's going to work and when it will be available to be used.
Stuart.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Yeah, we've had officers down in Lower Friarton and the harbour area, and we've updated all the contact details we have for that area. We're currently working with Scott Watson in comms to put together the text messaging system. It's beyond my knowledge of how it actually works, but it's similar to SEPA, where you sign up for a text message of an imminent closure of gates, and as soon as we decide that we've got to close gates, that text message gets sent out from someone within comms to say we're closing the gates.
Is that okay, Angus? Yep. I'm going to go to.
No, I've got a follow-up.
This is a new question, or is it follow-up?
It's a follow-up, and then I've got another question after that. Thanks, Stuart. Do you have any ideas of timescale?
I don't, but I'll try and get a timescale from Scott and Jed and get back to you.
Thank you, Grant. Stuart, I'll give you the second question.
Thank you, convener. Mr. Croft talked about the change of climate, and that was predicted decades ago. I was just wondering if we're thinking about critical days where transport infrastructure is affected. There's a big impact on emergency services and economic growth in a massive area. I was wondering, do we have data about how many days we have critical days, flooding versus snow and ice?
Stuart.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, councillor. Yeah, we have data, but our data around winter is more robust than it is around flooding, just by the very nature that we've always had winter. But we do have data around flooding and flood events and when that's impacted on the network. There are some roads across Perth and Kinross. Aberbothry is one that springs to mind. It regularly floods. It's not a big diversion, but it is regularly flooded, and we do have data around how often these sort of areas are out of commission.
Fraser first, and I'll let you come back in.
Sorry, just to add to that. So with Rick having joined us now as the new flooding manager, we're keen to really strengthen the ties between the flooding team and the Roads Maintenance Partnership, and to understand more, I suppose, around about the events, the nature of the events, where they're happening, etc. And that, I think, needs to and will be strengthened between those two teams.
Thank you. Grant, you want to come back in?
Yes, please, convener. Thank you. That was really good information. But on the back of that, I was wondering if you add up the snow, ice, critical days and flooding days, if you add them up, are we seeing a trend of more critical days or less? Do we have that kind of data yet?
We would need to crunch the numbers. I suspect the number of snow days, well, so the number of snow days is reducing, and it's probably being replaced by the number of flooding days. So a gut feeling is it's probably cost neutral in terms of actual numbers. It's just a different type of unavailability, but we would need to crunch the numbers to get a definitive answer to that.
Would certainly be interesting information, I think, to understand, but I get that crunching numbers is a resource as well. So, Angus, you're number 5.
We're almost there, convener. This question's on vulnerable people. It's referenced in 5.51 and it's referenced further on in 5.62. And I raised this once before, and I'm never quite sure I got to the bottom of where we were with this. But the idea that people who, in the event of a flood, will need assistance more than others, perhaps they have an electrical medical aid that's connected and may go off, or they're in a wheelchair. Where are we with being able to understand who these people are and where they live and what support they need from us in the event of some kind of flood emergency?
Yeah, and I'm not sure Elaine or if Hunter wants to come in as well. Elaine.
Thanks, Councillor Forbes. In terms of the data, ourselves, be it housing and health and social care, we do share data on people who are vulnerable, and that's people who are open to services. So we have alerts on our system. Hunter's been liaising with NHS and SSE to see if we could share data. There's been a bit of issues with GDPR. However, we're trying to resolve that rather than having people data, maybe addresses, and maybe flagging up areas that are maybe prone or with concentrated areas with vulnerable people. So we do have quite a lot of data that the council holds in terms of vulnerable people, but because of GDPR, we've been unable to get data from our other partners in terms of making that more robust. So if they're not open to services, which the majority are receiving services, particularly from health and social care, but we just still don't have that data for others, but we do have it for our own.
Thank you, Elaine. Hunter, do you want to come in and add anything to that? Or?
Aye, just briefly, convener, just to add to what Elaine was saying there, I was really encouraged recently to attend a presentation by colleagues from Angus Council who are working on that combined database that I think you were hoping for sometime in the future. At the moment, we can access the databases individually and identify geographically who might be vulnerable and for what reasons. But the prize we're aiming for is just one up-to-date register referenced by a UPRN, Unique Property Reference Number, which ties an individual down to a particular property and will indicate what sort of vulnerability they have so that they can prioritise a response to best meet their needs. I think we're starting to make some good progress on that despite the GDPR hurdles, and I'm hoping that we will at some point in the near future have that combined database for Tayside, and then hopefully the people at risk database for Scotland sometime in the future. So slow progress being made, but the reassurance, as Elaine said, is that we do have means at the moment to identify geographically people who are vulnerable should a flooding event take place. We're trying to beef that up a wee bit by asking our community resilience groups if they have awareness of individuals who may not be on our radar because they don't take council services or health services or whatever, and with their permission to add them to a list that we have so that we're getting as much coverage as we can.
Thank you, Hunter, and it's great to hear that there is some progress being made with that. Councillor Forbes, Angus, your 6th question.
Sorry, convener. 5.77. It's the proposal to add a recorded message to the emergency phone line. Now, I think we've all been there. Broadband goes off, and you think it's just me, but you phone your supplier and realise it's a problem at their end, and it must take pressure off of our system. Is there any progress to report on when this might happen?
Not sure if I've got colleagues. I think maybe Alan Taylor's not around today, but we'll get back to that, Councillor Forbes, if that's okay.
Keep going, Angus.
Thank you. This is my last question, you'll be pleased to know, and it's 5.96 references the flooding team. I know we had some staff losses there. I wonder if the flooding team is fully staffed and completely operational again.
I'll defer to Rick to give us the good news.
We're making progress. I'm literally this week in the middle of interviews for 2 new posts for watercourse inspectors, which links neatly to this paper because it moves from the summer student seasonal approach to an all year round permanent resource. And then in about 10 days time, we start the backfill exercise and interviews for the currently vacant technician post. And that, should those exercises be successful, will bring us to full complement.
Thank you for that, and another bit of good news to see that given the struggles over the last few years. If there's no further questions, I will move the report. Thanks for officers in preparing this. I know it went through quite a number of officers were involved in actually preparing this all year round weather event. Since becoming a councillor, 7 and a bit years ago, I think I have to give a mention to Deputy Provost Andrew Parrott, who on the political side has, as well as others, but especially from my perception, has been pushing for this idea of all year round resilience within the council, and it is great to actually see it appear. Officers are preparing, but officers in dealing with emergency events as well, I think they do work tirelessly. I think officers on the ground who are out there doing the work, resilience groups who are an absolute important part of our resilience, with 53 now throughout the area, provide a key support element for their local communities. As stated in the paper, a move away from a winter service is now required due to the impact of climate change on the residents of Perth and Kinross and beyond, all year round. It was evident last October when the storm experienced one after the other. Winter is, however, rightly referenced within the paper, and after many years of providing this service, it is well rehearsed, and staff and road workers are routinely preparing for it. It is noted that last year was fairly typical and no changes are proposed for this coming season, which starts on the 14th of October. It is also important to reference the fact that it is first and foremost residents' responsibility to protect themselves from the effects of weather. Council officers and other partners will support residents as best they can. The work going into assisting set up community resilience groups, with an impressive 53 set up to date within the area, is critical to ensure communities are as ready as they can be to support each other during these times. The council, as a first responder but not an emergency service, will also support and work with these partners as best they can and liaise directly with them during severe weather events. All services have reviewed their operations and outlined how they intend to deliver the services with these additional climate pressures. Relating to Perth, we are assessing what floodgates can permanently be closed and thereby save time in reacting to events. Purchasing of new lightweight flood barriers for Queensbridge and the promontory, and new lightweight contingency equipment being purchased. We continually to monitor weather forecasts and, in conjunction with SEPA, have updated the procedures we follow, including our out-of-hour staff availability. Our parking and housing officers knock doors to ensure our residents are safe, and our social care teams have continuity plans and vulnerable people identified for additional support. Our flood team continue to identify at-risk locations, and in accordance with legislation, and with partners prepare flood risk management plans and develop flood protection schemes. All this requires working together with colleagues across our service areas, and this paper identifies these links and responsibilities to outline how we intend to adapt to climate change and deliver a more resilient Perth and Kinross moving forward. I am happy to accept the recommendations within the report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Liz Barrett to second the report?
Thank you, Convener. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank officers for all the work and preparation to tackle the severe weather events. I also salute and thank our network of community resilience groups and everyone who steps up during an event to help their neighbours, especially the most vulnerable in times of need. I'm very happy to second this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments on it? I have a few down already. Can start off with Leader of the Council, Councillor Grant Lane, please.
Thanks very much, Convener and Vice Convener. I'm glad that this has finally come to pass, and I'll go even further back and pay some credit further back than Councillor Parrott, because I had discussions about the way we did things with the previous Convener of E&I, Councillor Forbes, who probably started the ball rolling towards where we've got to today. So I think the credit is we've moved in the right direction to get to this, to recognise that weather events can happen at any time, as can any event. Like the Convener and Vice Convener, I'd like to pay credit to, again, we will support communities and give them the tools to help to do the job in their own locale. They will probably know it better than we do. We'll all know our own words probably inside out, but the people that are living in these villages, hamlets and towns will know it even better. And it's great to see them working together. They don't, if you look at Alyth, Blairgowrie and Cooperangus and that, forming a sort of a group that can go, because weather events are so localised now that you could hit one of these quite close together populated areas and not hit them all. So it's a good news that we're recognising that, and it's good to see this down in paper now that we're recognising that it's not just winter maintenance. Winter maintenance is very important, but we're actually tackling the problem all year round. We can be hit with some sort of event. So thanks for bringing the paper forward. I think it's really good to see.
Thank you, Grant. Angus.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm pleased to see this here. As Councillor Lang said, this has been ongoing for quite some time. Have a particular interest in vulnerable people, and I'm pleased that Hunter's suggesting there is some progress on that. I'm sure I'll be talking about this again. I do believe that we should have a facility for people who feel they're vulnerable to register with us, so we can give them faster and higher priority care. I think it's also important to reflect on the fact that many of our staff and Tayside contract staff in these events will be probably putting their lives at risk and certainly making themselves very uncomfortable and working long hours in damp, wet and pretty miserable environment. And I think I've learned in my 7 years at council that no matter what we as an organisation do, we'll still not keep everybody happy. And I think we just have to accept that. And I think that's going back to the phrase that's used here, which is managing expectations. But just to reiterate, thanks to everyone who's goes out of their way to help people in these unfortunate events.
Thank you for that, Angus. David.
Thank you. I sit on the Integration Joint Board and Integration, maybe, yeah, who knows, anyway. And the question we ask about vulnerable people is often asked, and the Health and Social Care Partnership have a really good handle on who their vulnerable people are, and they do a really good job of making sure they're looked after in emergencies. There was an example in one case in my ward where the police were called out to get a carer through the flood water in to see a carer. So I am comfortable that we do a good job of looking after our most vulnerable.
Thanks for that, David. Andrew.
Yes, thank you very much, Convener, and thank you very much for your kind words, and I'm sure others have been involved as well. While snow and ice events tend to be disruptive in my experience, damage tends to be short-term and sadly limited to people and perhaps vehicles. I've always been of the view that wind or high wind and high water events can be both disruptive and very damaging in the medium and longer term, necessitating considerable spend on recovery of infrastructure. And we're living in an age when some places are reporting once in 200-year events every year or every other year. So I'm delighted to see that this paper has come forward. And I suppose my interest in this has been longer term, in that in my previous life, I can only remember one or two events where military aid to the civil community was called for in a very localized way for snow events. But the number of times military aid to the civil community was called for flooding events increased throughout my career. Thanks.
Some good points, Andrew. Thank you. Any further comments? Thank you very much. That brings end to the business that have to agree the recommending. Sorry, we're just missing the important part. Don't worry, anybody. Can we all agree the recommendations in the report? Thank you. We can now close the meeting, and thank you very much for which was, I think, some really good questions in there, and appreciate everybody for that. Have a good day. Thank you.